All right, so this is a continuation of part one. Make sure you check that out so you really have a full understanding of what's going on. And this will cover the positional drills that you need to do to address these issues, some training considerations, and how to properly warm up depending on which pattern you're in. So hopefully you find this information useful, and look out for part three where we're gonna go through a full workout for each kind of presentation. Thanks. So let's go over to fix your shit. If you're in a pec pattern and you're compressed anterior to posterior, you got these ribs all super squished. Your pelvis is also squished. My pelvis model doesn't squish, but those become compressed as well. First thing you're gonna wanna do is you wanna get on your side and let gravity help you bring that cylinder shape back to your rib cage, back to your pelvis. So here I am on a yoga block. I'm putting that right on the side of my ribs, covering right where it starts. And I've got a roller pretty high up on my thighs, feet together. And I mean, this is pretty basic shit, and it's pretty crazy how much of an impact this can have. And you should really be able to feel a difference in your breathing once you have this ribs compressed. You should feel air coming in and expanding from the front and the back. So when you lay on your right side, just take a big inhale through your nose. As you exhale, just think about sinking down into that yoga block. And so there's tons of variations of like everything I'm showing you. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible and not overwhelm you. It's still gonna be a lot, but this is the most basic way to start. And when we go on the left side, we probably want to go ahead and get this right side to lengthen a little more. Give yourself a gentle little reach there. You want both feet contacts to usually be on there. It looks like I'm a little bit off. Ideally, you have your feet flat on there. You don't have to use the wall. It does help a little bit, especially when we're on this left side. I have to be aware of like making sure that my right hip is over my left and not behind it. So I'm kind of like always aware that I'm wanting to pull this back a little bit. So same thing, deep breaths, and just add that little bit of the reach with the arm. All right, next, we want to start inhibiting some things, okay? So if you're in a pec pattern, the main things we want to inhibit are your lats, your pecs, and your hip flexors. This move here is going to inhibit your lats and your pecs really, really well. You might be able to do this on the Smith machine if you have the right height and setup. You don't necessarily have to do it on a rack. But what we want to do is get in that hanging position, pull our pelvis under us, and focus on really good inhales and exhales. So we're always gonna exhale through an open mouth, like a sigh, fog in a glass. We're gonna inhale silent through the nose, deep, but not deep enough that you feel your neck. And so this is like stretching the shit out of my pecs and lats. This is like one of the best moves you can do. And I don't expect a lot of you guys to do this, but it will make it better if you include a balloon. Now I know no one wants to look stupid at the gym, doing weird shit, but this is what I do. People really don't give me shit. It helps that I'm in shape, look good. But what you want to do if you use the balloon, and you can just see, look how much more engaged I got all my abs, is you're going to exhale hard into it for about 4 seconds and then hold for like a 2 to 3 second pause before you inhale. Don't like pinch it off with your mouth. Yeah, and this makes it so much better because it really teaches you how to use your diaphragm muscles and your deep internal obliques. It's really the only way to add resistance to those muscles. Like to add weights to them. And I'll show you guys one more with the balloon just because this is so helpful. This is often the first thing I do. If someone's just super duper extended, I'll put them against the wall in this short seated position. And what we're gonna do is we have our left hand on our shin, so we just barely compress those left ribs a little bit, and we're gonna make sure that we are rounded against there as we're inhaling. Really important not to gain height. We're gonna do the same breathing pattern, and the breathing is so important on this. Exhale hard for about 4 seconds, hold for 2 to 3, and then inhale. I'm also pulling a little bit of a hamstring activation. I'm trying to stretch those lumbar extensors right there. And I'm getting some good posterior expansion. This is a great move. After we have done those moves, those are more inhibitions. This is how we start to get our body to activate the things that we need to pull us out of the pec pattern. So this is gonna really activate our medial hamstrings to help pull our pelvis under. And so if we're in a pec pattern, typically I like to start just with like my hands on my ribs to really guide them down. The feet are gonna be wider than like hip width on here. And we're really focusing on those inner contact points right under the big toe and inner heel. My butt's in the air, but I'm not scrunching it from my booty or my abs. I'm just using those hamstrings. And I'm guiding those ribs down with my hands to help as well. Now, if you notice that, say you had a lot more restriction on the left arm like I did whenever I was going up, then you can also do a little variation on this. First I'm gonna show you just the reach with 2 hands. And again, if you're in a pec pattern presenting pretty symmetrically, that's really good. That can help close down the ribs, can help get more posterior expansion. But if you want some to that left side specifically, which is not uncommon, then I like to do this position. I'm gonna reach. That reach is going to get my spiny processes to turn to the right and open up more space on that left upper back to expand. So I'm reaching on the exhales with my right hand slightly across my body. And so I'm gonna feel a little heavier on the left side of my back as I do this. So this would be the first kind of positional drill that you do after the inhibitions that I showed you. And then this would be the second. This wall was so fucking cold too. So I have like the very, very top part of my butt almost off. I'm really heavy on my SI joints. I'm doing that soft reach, and I'm just really trying to think about keeping like my lumbar spine up there to about the TL junction, and then the upper half is off. Really important you don't gain height when you do this. Really reference your heels, especially on this, because again, we need to pull your center of gravity back a little bit, and this is a good way to do it. And then finally, we have this move is an all four modified belly lift. And then typically what I recommend is starting with your right hand in the air. We're gonna do more on this left side because we need to facilitate more internal obliques on this side. So I'm pretty rounded here. You could do varying degrees of like flexion in the back to determine where we wanna get air, if we wanna get more anterior expansion or posterior expansion. Typically, if we're pec, we're gonna be a little bit more rounded in the back. Again, because we're usually super extended. And so you're just gonna barely pick up one hand, be heavy on that hand and that opposite knee. Feel the obliques of the side that you're on. Sometimes when we lift up the right hand and we're on the left, we kind of contort ourselves to still use the right abs. Make sure you feel the left abs there. And this is actually really tricky to do correctly. Your body's gonna wanna get wonky. And here's one more that I think some of you guys would benefit from. I don't always do this, but if you have like a super flared rib cage, then this can help a lot. You're gonna really push super hard in the air on the exhales. You're gonna get some protraction of your shoulders, turn the thumbs out a little bit. You can see these ribs drop, hold for 2 seconds after you exhale, and then inhale, keeping those ribs down. You wanna really connect to the posterior expansion of your upper back, like air bubbles. I'm also using a towel on my neck, because like as I'm going up with those, I'm going to more neck extension. So you wanna give yourself a little bit of support. And I'm gonna be pulling those hamstrings a little bit, making sure that my lumbar does not go into extension as I take these inhales. And this is a really good way to train those ribs to go down. Those are positional drills to kind of help get things reset. This is just kind of like warm-up. So an easy warm-up that you can do to get your center of gravity back. It looks a lot like what we did earlier. Now I'm just on high wedges though. So the good thing about being on these high wedges, it puts you in more of an early stance ER position instead of like a late stance ER like we are. So you're gonna be really heavy on your heels, and your knees will be way behind your toes. And we'll be in that plantar flex position. Again, you can do this without the wedges, it's just not quite as good. And I'm flat on here now, I'm not really rounded, I'm trying to stay upright. If you're super pec pattern, like really, really bad, you might need to turn your toes slightly out and the wedges slightly out. And your goal will be to gradually bring them more narrow. All right, here's another warm up. This could also be like a cool down, I guess, or just some abs at the end if you want to do it. This is a really cool move. It can really help you get some expansion if you do it right. What we want to do is hug our knees, stay in flexion, inhale as we rock back, and exhale as we go forward. Trying not to break this shape. So I don't want my pelvis to move, I don't want my head to move, I don't want to crunch in. So if this is too difficult, which it will be for a lot of you guys, grab from here and just kick the feet up and use a little bit of that momentum. So that can move, but everything from the knees up to my head, you don't want that to change. So you don't want to do this. You don't want to just rock everything to get there. All right, so when it comes to actual like workout stuff, this is a really good warm-up, a good way to start. We want to do some kind of a vertical squat. I really like doing this for most people. I put the big wedges underneath you and a foam roller behind your back, and that allows you to really stay vertical as we're squatting. And again, this is to help get your center of gravity back. It's going to help unlock some of that lower posterior compression we were talking about underneath the bottom of the pelvis. So this will open up some ER space and even some IR as well. Another good move is this 8-point plank. I really like this because this teaches you how to use the deeper abs. You can't really just crunch your way through this and just rectus abs your way through this. So I'm on my knees, I got my feet flat, I've pulled everything up in space, and I'm really kind of domed, but I'm not like rounding, I'm not closing down my sternum. My sternum's open. I've just pulled all my vertebrae up towards the ceiling, and I'm hanging out there taking deep breaths in, thinking expansion. As I'm exhaling, I'm thinking abs, and as I'm inhaling, I'm thinking expansion everywhere. And this is really, really hard for a lot of people. A lot of people get super shaky when they do this for the first couple times. Another fun training thing you can do, which is really good, this can be part of your workout, it could be a warm-up as well, is to get deep on these wedges. Again, better with wedges, you could do it without, and just do some curls. So we're working through this deep flexion as the arms are coming back and we're inhaling. That position allows us to really open up this dorsal rostral area and get some expansion throughout all of our posterior chain. And I really particularly like to even do like alternating arms on this because you can kind of get that slight turn I was talking about and get a little bit more extra expansion on one side. Sometimes after you kind of start addressing your issues a little bit, you don't necessarily have to go through all the positional drills in the beginning. Sometimes you can just go to certain lows and it'll help loosen up things. And this is one of those really good moves that may open up ER and IR space in you. It can really help get rid of some more of that lower posterior compression. It can help you kind of connect with your foot context with the different propulsive cycles. Really good move if you're in a pec pattern. Even if you're in an AIC, this is also a really good one, but I put it more for pecs. So you're just gonna have your elbows in front of you and you're just gonna drop straight down. You can hold or you can do reps. You want to make sure that your knees are lined up with your hips. We don't have like one side of our pelvis way higher. Inhale on the way down. You can do reps or you could hold. And I'm really thinking about those two contact points. As I push back, I'm going to be a little more in the heel. And as I come forward, I'm going to be inner heel and that underneath the big toe. Now, a lot of you guys aren't gonna be able to keep that back leg straight, and that's really important. You want that knee to be going straight down to the ground. And if you're hitting like an anterior tilt as you're doing this, that's not gonna happen. So one way to counter that and to help you keep in this upright position and keep that back leg vertical is just to hold a plate in front of you. So this will help a lot for a lot of you. This is a really good warm-up for pec pattern and AIC. Like I said, most pec pattern people have a little bit of AIC underneath them, so this works really well for them, but it could totally work great for AIC as well. So you want to do like a heavy suitcase carry. You just got to go like you got somewhere to go. So you want to really swing that arm. Now just holding this on the right hand only is going to make you activate this left adductor. You're going to activate your like right glute mid a little bit, your posterior glute mid, a little bit of these internal obliques on the left side to keep you from tipping over. So holding this on your right side can help address some of the imbalances. And a lot of times just doing this will affect the table test a lot positively. So you want to also get like a heavy weight. When like I'm carrying like a 70, you need something that's gonna make you work a little bit. If you have a pec pattern, some things to consider when it comes to just training in general are think about what's gonna make it worse. So if you're dealing with pain or this is something you're really trying to address, going really heavy with like a low bar back squat's probably not the best idea. Doing a ton of like barbell rows or bench press, especially bench press, is not the best idea. Not saying you can't do it, it's totally fine if you do things to counter it, but like the bench press really goes into that compression that we already have. So things that can be really helpful would be to do things like a safety bar heels elevated squat. Like if you do a safety bar squat on some wedges, focus on going like more straight down, that's super beneficial. That helps kind of counter some of your issues. You also want to think about lifting weights in a way that's going to keep your pelvis in line with your rib cage. You're so opposite directions that a lot of times doing like presses with your feet up on some dumbbells or a box or even against the wall can really be beneficial to help keep your stack and help kind of bring back some of that relative motion. If you're doing a flat press, you can put your feet up on a bench. That can be really helpful. And also doing reciprocal or alternating moves if you're in a pec pattern is really, really beneficial because if you're doing like one arm at a time, one side's expanding while the other's compressing, you're not going to create that global compression. That can be really beneficial. Another thing to keep in mind is you probably don't want to be doing like a lot of back extension movements, reverse hypers or just hyperextension. You're already hyperextended, so you don't really want to reinforce that right now. Okay, so now let's look at what we want to inhibit if we are in a left AIC pattern. So if we're in a pec pattern, we want to inhibit both lats, both pecs, your paraspinals, your hip flexors. If we're in a left AIC pattern, the first thing we're going to inhibit is our left posterior capsule. That's kind of this back side of your pelvis on the left side. If it's really tight, then we're not going to be able to get a posterior glide and get that femur to move in the back of the capsular space. And so this is the easiest way to do this. Okay, I'm going to shorten that left side. I'm going to shift pretty much all my weight onto this left leg, right hand across the knee, left hand on the hip. You can see even my head is slightly bent the right way. And what I want to do is really make sure this toe is turned in very slightly, almost a little pigeon. And I'm going to be so heavy on the left inner heel and that spot under the left big toe. Never going to lose the outer part, but we're just heavier on the inner. And I'm kind of shifting all my weight back in that direction, very slightly pushing the right knee forward. So what you can't have happen is you can't corgi your butt. A lot of times as people are trying to push, they'll either end up turning their hips out here or they'll round it around back there.
You want to drive straight back. You should feel some inner thigh and potentially some hamstring. You don't want to feel a ton of lateral stuff. You might feel tiny anterior glute mid. We shouldn't feel like outer butt. And the breaths are everything on here. All right, next we want to inhibit our lat, and this is the easiest way to do that. It's not necessarily the way I always do, but I want you guys to have the easiest method. So we're just holding on with a pronated hand position, and I'm pulling away, opening the hips a little bit. You might get some intercostals, but this is a little bit more for the lats, and I'm getting, again, those big breaths are key here. I'm making sure I'm kind of rounded everywhere up top. Have slight global flexion. And sometimes it takes like a little bit of time to actually get into it and start feeling it deep, but you should feel that pretty deep when you get in. And right here, I'm actually shortening the left side as well to help me get more out of that right. Yeah, now I got a lot more. And also, we probably want to inhibit this left pec. I actually prefer to do this on the table, but I just want to show you the way you can do it on the ground. So as we exhale, we're going to let our knees slowly fall to the right. As we inhale, we're going to put a stop to that, and you should feel like a really good stretch along this chest wall. So this is what I mentioned earlier. You might want to inhibit this before you do that arm off the table test, because that could give you a false one if this is super duper tight. And then finally, we're going to inhibit this left mediastinum. So we're going to try to get this upper left part of your back to expand a little bit. When you have your hands on the block and one hand's elevated, it's going to kind of push those ribs back. Also, the fact that the right hand is in front is going to facilitate that spinal rotation to the right as well, and so that's going to open up more space for us to open in here. And you can also make it a little tougher by lifting up your knees. So again, you might not have to do all these inhibitions every single time. Probably going to want to do the lat and the post capsule most every time, but you might not need to do the pec. You might not need to do this one every time. So now that we have done the inhibitions, now we're going to start activating the muscles that we want to pull our pelvis and our ribcage back in alignment. Here I am in a similar 90-90 setup, although my feet aren't as wide, if you notice. So I'm still gonna start the same. I'm gonna lift up on the exhale. I'm gonna guide those ribs down. But you see what I just did here? I shifted that right knee up as I brought that left back a little bit. So I wanna get more out of this left hamstring. I'm gonna pull that up and pull that down. Okay, I'm also applying a little bit of pressure with the left knee into that ball while I'm not trying to do that on the right. So I'm reaching across the body on the right because you're gonna need to get better expansion on the left. And now I'm kind of even coming off the heel on this right foot. So I'm really making my left hamstring work hard. I'm trying to take off the right. I don't really need right hamstring too much if I'm on a left AIC pattern. And so this is typically the easiest way to do this, but we can also get tricky, and we can lift up the leg completely off the wall, and you just got to make sure to not lose that left knee back. And this is even obviously a lot more hamstring, but a lot of times this is too much. You see people start to lose this internal rotation. The knee will flare out wide, they'll get funky. Now, this is really hard to go on the same side because we're going to want to come out of that as we do that. So this is really getting a lot of left abs, left hamstrings, a little bit of left adductors, reaching the same side is the hardest. So after we get the hamstring, the left hamstring, we want to get the left adductor, the ipsicondylar adductor, the high part by your groin. And so what we want to do on this is, depending on how tight you are, you might need to set it pretty high. I'm showing a pretty high setup. You could also go lower. If you feel TFL, this area like kind of on the front side of your hip as you're doing this, then probably try to bring this higher. And if you still feel TFL, then something's wrong. You probably need to retry to inhibit that left posterior capsule. So I'm shortening my left side with the elbow. A lot of people do reaches towards the wall. I just get like neck. If I do my elbow, I feel a lot better. So on the inhales, I'm gonna pull back this top left knee, and the whole time I'm applying a little pressure down with the right, down and maybe slightly forward. So inhale and pull back, then exhale and squeeze hard. Don't give up any of the ground that you gained on the pullback. So I'm gonna inhale and pull, exhale, squeeze, reset after 4 breaths. So I got those left obliques down, inhaling and pulling. Don't lose your foot contacts. Exhale, squeeze. Should feel those inner thigh going. I don't know why this is all getting blurry, sorry. Last one, so we got the left hamstring, left adductor, and then we were gonna go after right glute in order to get out of this left AIC pattern. So when we lay on our left side, we want something underneath our kind of left side of our torso between our ribs and our hips. And that's to help facilitate that left side bend so we can lengthen the right side. Now what I want to do is I'm going to round my back a little bit. Again, I'm not going to scrunch my butt and use my abs too hard. I'm going to go real soft and pull from the hamstrings and tiny bit of lower abs. I'm going to drive my right hip towards the wall and the left hip into the ground so that you feel some left abs as you do that. I'm going to reach up with that right hand, And then I'm gonna really turn the right hip over, make sure I'm in front of the left. A lot of times, again, it wants to stay behind. And as I'm pushing forward, I'm gonna try to pick up that knee, whatever I can do without losing that inner contact point. Should feel right where I was touching that outer lower portion. These feet are actually up a little bit as well. When you do the left adductor pullback, both feet are on the ground. So it's a little different position. I'm really trying to drive forward. This is hard for me. I'm freaking out. I'm also trying to lift up the left knee. Now, I'm just trying to innervate it and actually feel a little bit of here. You don't have to do that. You can just get the right glute. And some people may actually be able to lift up that left knee, which is great. But if you can even get it to activate a little bit without turning off this glute, that's really good. And as I look at myself, I wish I had this hip a little bit more down. I've lost it just a little bit. You can see in the beginning, I feel like I have it a little bit better. So I'm gonna tuck, I'm gonna drive that down, and you can see I kind of lose that a little bit. So this stuff is hard, and you don't have to get it 1,000% right, but if you get it really wrong, you're gonna not make any change. You might just be somehow reinforcing your pattern. So again, I'm going to reach out as far forward, push that hip over, because again, the right side of the pelvis is gonna be behind. So if I'm on the ground like this, I gotta really push that right side over because it's already skewed behind it. So once we get that right glute fired, I like to do this to kind of address some of the symmetries. This is a right sideline apical expansion. And really what I'm getting is a lot of intercostals kind of loosening up. I'm posted real heavy on this hand. I'm in kind of a 90-90 base position. I'm pushing down on both knees into the ground. Some of you may need like a reference, like a towel or like one of those foam pads or something to push your knees against, but you need to be able to push them against something. Some of you might even need to sit on one of those foam pads. So I got to make sure the right shoulder is higher than the left. I'm reaching with the left on the inhales, and then as I exhale, I'm sinking hard on this right hand, trying to feel this chest wall and all these intercostals, maybe lats, stretch out. And I'm also going to crunch that left side just a little bit to feel the left obliques. So reach on the inhales, and then sink down hard on the exhales. We want to really stretch out this right side and shorten the left. And then this is the same move we did for the pec pattern, but instead of holding both knees, you're just going to hold the left because we want more left posterior expansion. So same process. Try to not get anything to move unless you have to do a little bit to help. All right, another good warm-up or just a core exercise is to get on this left side plank position. And we want to go supinated on the left side because we want posterior expansion. I'm going to reach. I'm going to actually drive my right hip down and knee forward as well. And I'm going to really drive up from these ribs. A lot of people, when you do this, you're going to push your body away. You don't want, ideally my head's too down, but that's not a big deal. And I'm reaching on the right. So I'm just trying to really compress this left and open the right. If you want to get fancy, you could add a little bit to this. Also, I'm turned over just a little bit. I'm not completely in a side plank. I'm like turned just a little bit, making sure that I don't sink back. I'm really pushing away from the ground. That'll help with posterior expansion. If I was to do the right side, you would do it with your palm down the other way because we want to promote more anterior expansion of that right chest wall. But if you're in an AIC, you want to be on this left side. So what I'm doing here is I'm just pulling back that right shoulder blade. Remember, the left shoulder blade is further away from the spine and the right is closer in a left AIC. And this is kind of pushing you that opposite way. So this is really trying to get your sternum to actually turn to the left while your rib cage opens to the right. Now this is a little bit more advanced. I didn't know if I should include this, but I want to give you guys just one more option that I do. So really similar to what I did on the other one, but now this is active. I'm pushing away, I'm turning into it a little bit, still pushing the right knee forward, and I'm gonna row as I exhale. I'm gonna inhale and get that expansion down here. So this is a small range of motion, but it's really challenging when you do it right. All right, so this is super tricky. You know, there's so much stuff I can include, and there's a lot of stuff I didn't include. There's a lot of things called integrated moves. I think I only showed like one or two. And there's also some benefits to doing like heavy loads with an asymmetrical setup in certain ways, like hinging with different foot positions or maybe using a wedge on one foot. But I didn't want to make this just so overwhelming. So I'll probably make another video diving a little bit deeper into this, but I did want to cover this particular move because it is super beneficial. This is called the Camperini deadlift, I think, Camperini, something like that. Super helpful at getting your pelvis to reorient. So again, remember our pelvis is right here. This move is gonna get that whole thing to turn a little bit. And you can get some really good improvements on table tests with this move. Really tricky though. So what we wanna do is I've got the left foot on a small wedge facing normal. So it's ramped up, my heel's on the upper part. I'm gonna turn this palm in a little bit, And I'm basically doing like a single leg hinge. I'm always gonna close that rib. 90+% of my weight is on this left side. And I'm kind of pushing off the right a little bit. I'm more just pushing the right knee almost slightly forward as I shift back on that left. So should feel like left hamstring, left inner thigh a little bit. Really kind of tuck through as you come up, because we want that those upper hamstrings to be able to pull our lumbar into a little bit of flexion. And so you want to make sure all the weight's on this left side. A lot of times people have a little bit too much spread evenly. In fact, I could probably shift a little bit more. Yeah, there you go. Looks pretty good. Sometimes I even think about using this adductor to try to pull my body in. Okay, now this is super tricky, but it's really good. If you're missing right external rotation, if you're presenting like really like a left AIC, especially if you did that last move where you reoriented, now you might be presenting a little bit differently. If you're missing right internal rotation, this can really help restore some relative motion. So the first one just oriented our pelvis. Now we're gonna get relative motion and get the right innominate bone to actually move forward a little bit. This should always use the pelvis model. So the first move took us from here to here. This next move is gonna take us from there to there. So it's really hard to not come out of this, what we call left AFIR, to not come out of this internal rotation position on this. So we're gonna put in the same side hand, but now I'm like maybe 60% on the left, 40% on the right, instead of like 90+ on the left. And I'm really pushing back with this right leg onto the left. I need to feel some of this outer glute firing. So now it's a lot more active move on the right side. My right side's contributing a lot to it. So I should be feeling like right outer glute, while I'm still feeling like left hamstring and a little inner thigh. And your body's gonna wanna try really hard to get out of this. So this is really similar to, I don't know if your brain can kind of make the connection, is this is very similar to the 90-90 on the wall where I'm reaching with the left hand, where I just have the left hamstring, the left foot on the wall working. So like that's really hard to get into. This is kind of the similar setup on your feet. Again, I'm really driving back. Both shins will be like a negative angle. You're gonna be pushing your whole body backwards. So that's really tricky. I don't recommend it unless you feel super confident, but it can have a big impact. But this is something that it's hard to coach. Like I have to be right on somebody to coach them this. So let's go into how to warm up if you're a left AIC. So let's say you have a leg day. This is probably one of my favorite ways to warm up. I'm gonna really drive some left internal rotation here, and this is a great move. Like people that don't have IR, when they do this, the whole body will get like shaky and they'll be freaking out. So you wanna use a rack for support. And I'm always gonna be in that IR position. Sometimes I'll put a band around here for some people too to like turn on these internal rotation muscles, your adductors and stuff. You can also even put it around your foot if that's kind of one of your weak points, to make sure that your foot actually can pronate. So I'm gonna bring this across the body, and I just wanna feel a little inner thigh and that kind of that connection where the hamstring glute tie in, that posterior capsule area on here as well. So my leg is pretty forward, it's not too behind me. And I'm just dropping down. I don't wanna go past like, 70 degrees, whatever you got, but it's not like a deep thing. As long as you get past 30, you're pretty good. And then if we're gonna do a leg day and I really wanna warm up where I'm weak, right side is gonna need more external rotation. It's gonna need more of a late propulsive kind of stance. Because again, remember, we wanna stay on our right side, we wanna get off our left. So what I just did was an early propulsive stance on the left side. We're practicing staying on there. Now I'm practicing getting off. So I'm actually gonna have my heel only elevated with like a 5-pound plate. And you want just the heel on there, nothing else, because you wanna be able to actually connect with the foot flattening out. You wanna feel like your arch go down a little bit. And so the setup on this is a little different. I'm still gonna be on the right hand, so now I'm ipsilateral. My left leg's gonna go further back than my right. I'm gonna have more positive at a shin angle. That knee's gonna come forward more. I'm gonna be getting like outer butt on here compared to like hamstring and inner thigh on the right, on the left, I mean. Yeah, right there. So really driving forward that right side. Even kind of thinking about letting that right innominate bone slightly go forward as I'm coming down. I'm thinking about keeping the left reaching behind so that right's going. So this is a really good way to warm up for some bilateral moves. And say I'm doing a hinge, I'm gonna do a kickstand hinge right here. So sometimes I put my back foot against the wall as well to keep it flat and give myself a little bit of a reference. Sometimes I'll put a foam roller between somebody's knee and the wall if they're having a lot of trouble connecting to that IR. So again, I'm doing a little bit more of an internal rotation through this left side. Same exact thing I was doing on the squats, I'm gonna do on the hinge. I'm gonna keep it on the right, and I'm getting a little more of an external rotation bias, a little more of those outer glutes. I'm trying to do things to, again, to reorient the pelvis and to gain a little bit of relative motion back. That would be a great warm up before I did like a stiff leg deadlift. Let's say I'm actually doing some working sets in like Bulgarian split squats. All right, so here I'm doing the right side. I'm pretty normal looking. I'm just gonna keep these even. I really don't need to bias anything. As I go to the left, I'm gonna turn that one in, and I'm gonna be a little more internally rotated here. Yeah, I have a heavier one on the right one here. Not that much heavier, but to bias more ER on the right and more IR on the left. So you could offset these, or you could keep them the same. Just changing the hand position could be enough. If you're really skewed one way, then maybe make it heavier on the right side. So you'll always see that left shoulder lower whenever you're doing this offset stuff. So here's one example of an integrated exercise that could work for you. If you're in a pec pattern, you really don't do too many integrated exercises. There are a couple, but I definitely think they're more beneficial if you're in a left AIC. So I don't want to cover too much of these, but in the next video I make, I'll show you all kinds of cool things like this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull this left leg back and the right leg front. Yeah, see that little shift? I'm gonna close on that left side, left shoulder below the right. I'm gonna pull that back, and I'm just breathing through there. So there's a standing version of this, which is hard. If you're too tight to sit here with a long leg position, you can actually sit down on something, ideally where your knees will be hip height or above. Have like a ball or something between your knees, still pull that left knee back, and then just reach the same style. So if you can't do that, that one's good. You can also make this a little extra spicy by getting a band in both hands. So now I'm really working on getting this protraction on the left, retraction on the right. I'm pulling that left adductor back. Sometimes if you're like not that far off in an AIC pattern, you can just do one or two of these integrated moves and it sets you where you need to be. You don't necessarily even have to go through all the stuff I just showed you. Again, in the beginning you will, and I still do a lot of those. I pretty much inhibit my post capsule every time, but sometimes you can cut out a lot of the work if you do one of these effectively. Just some general like points of awareness that can help regardless of the pattern you're in is to think about keeping your stack, keeping pressure on those two contact points of your feet that I was talking about, and keeping like your head looking slightly in the horizon. Don't look up too much, don't look down. Now, if you are in like a pec pattern, you're probably gonna really struggle to not flare the ribs. That's gonna be like the main thing you're thinking about probably. If you're in a left AIC pattern, something that can really help is to think about these left ribs. Because what happens, especially if you're doing presses that go more and more vertical, you see yourself start to kind of like shift over, close that left rib, and that'll fix a lot of things. I also would think about the contact points typically on your left foot, possibly more than your right. Not always the case, but again, we need a more internal rotation on the left. So those two contact points, the inner heel and the underneath the first med head, might help you keep more. As I'm going like heavy on leg stuff, my left leg wants to rotate out. I want to go on the outside of my foot. So that really helps me think about my left ribs and my contact points on my left foot. All right, so hopefully some of that was helpful for you guys. At least it gives you some awareness and some ways to kind of fix some issues if you have them. Again, the main way this stuff is going to benefit you is going to help you prevent injuries and allow you to train harder, but it will have an impact on your aesthetics as I showed you the different presentations. And I actually think it'll have a benefit on your ability to, build muscle and hypertrophy as well. All right, so like I said, I think I'm gonna do a part 2 and go more into the actual workout stuff, show you guys like a specific workout for a left AIC pattern, a specific workout for a pec pattern. So if you think that's something you would like, just drop a line in the comments and I'll make sure to do that. If you have any questions, comments, concerns at all, let me know. I try to respond to everybody in the comments. So, all right, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.